Hello, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott. This is Insights to the End Times, and I'm really excited that you've joined us today. We're going to spend the last 4 days of this week looking at the condition of our society morally and spiritually. And I've got some really, disturbing news for you as to the deterioration of both, but at the same time, they represent signs of the end. And the deeper we get into this mess, the more we see that we're getting closer and closer to the very end. We've been examining scriptures and world conditions in our Insights to the End Times program now for more than several months, for over a year and a half. And if you go to our website, insightstotheendtimes.com, you will find an awful lot of good material in that respect. Today I want to look at our moral condition, and I'm going to take you on a trip that's a little bit different than our norm, but let me share some personal thoughts with you for just a moment. I live in southern Ontario here in Canada, and my location is just north of Lake Erie, which is one of the 5 Great Lakes separating Canada and the U.S. And because we live in this location so close to the border, we are very well versed in American issues and so on and so forth. But our American friends aren't as well versed in Canadian issues. So when I go into the States, especially to a conference, many of my American friends will ask me how cold it is back home and so on. In fact, it will be the middle of summer and they will be planning a snow ski trip to Canada, into my area, because we're in Canada, therefore it has to be cold. They almost seem to identify where I live in southern Ontario as being at the North Pole. And some of them even wonder if we live in igloos. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but really the lack of understanding is quite preposterous in many instances. So as a result of that, and the fact that we attend a lot of U.S. conferences, I decided to do some research. I looked at the globe, and I looked at my location, and I found that latitude are the lines that go around the globe horizontally, and they measure the distance from the equator as you head towards the North or the South Pole. Well, we live in the Northern Hemisphere, and my location is at 42.98 degrees latitude, which means we're not even halfway between the equator and, say, the North Pole. We have a location in southern Ontario that's just a little bit further south than mine, and it's at 41.76 degrees latitude. Now you wonder, where are you going with this? Well, I'm just trying to point a couple points out to you, and I don't want to disrespect you if you're American, but I want you to listen for just a moment. There's a city or a town or a village, I'm not sure how large it is, in Northern California. The name is Hornbrook. Its latitude reading is 41.91 degrees. Our southernmost tip, which is just a little bit south of where I'm located, is 41.76, which means our location is further south than that location in Northern California. In fact, we're at 42.98, which means roughly a 60-mile difference between my location and Northern California. We're almost at the very same line of latitude. So I did more research, and I found that in the United States, there are 12 states that are entirely located north of my location. Like Alaska, for instance. On the West Coast, you have Washington and Oregon. You have the Dakotas. You have other states like Montana and let's say Wisconsin and Minnesota, et cetera, et cetera. On the East Coast, you have states like Maine and New Hampshire. They lie entirely north of my location. There are 7 additional states that are partially north of my location, like Michigan. It's partially north. There's a portion that's south of me. But when people are in Detroit, Michigan, and they want to come into Ontario, they cross over the river to Windsor, Ontario, and they're going due south to do so. Now, most of my American friends cannot picture that whatsoever. It's beyond their comprehension, even when I show them a map. Now, here's what I'm getting at. Here's what I'm getting at. We can mistakenly believe false information easily. We can form the wrong opinions on things and treat it as factual based on the wrong information. We hardly ever do research. We hardly ever look into anything. We just take something for granted. We hear, oh, you're from Canada, then it must be really, really cold. Here's another thing I hear a lot, and once again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I'm trying to make the point that we accept wrong information so very readily without any research. Now, I live in southwestern Ontario, which is kind of on the eastern side of Canada. And we have provinces out west, which are north of the United States, like the Dakotas and so on. And those provinces are known as prairie provinces. One of the large cities out west is Calgary, Alberta. It is approximately between 2,500 and 3,000 miles from my location. And we'll meet people in the southern states and they'll say, oh, you're from Canada. Listen, I've got a friend who lives in Calgary. Do you know who he is? Have you ever met him? Oh, yeah, we have dinner every weekend. He's 3,000 miles from me. My point is this. Since we easily mistake information and accept it as truth, then how much information about the end days have we accepted as truth that's wrong? That we have nothing to be concerned about? Amen. Come on. Now let's think about this. Today is November the 29th. There's only another day left before we hit December. December represents a cold month. We'll have snow and ice. Our temperature will dip down into below 0 Celsius, down maybe even to minus 20 Celsius, which on a Fahrenheit calendar or a thermometer means about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But here's the good news. Spring cometh. Summer comes. We're going to go way back up to 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees in the summer. So we know even though we'll suffer through this cold season, warmth is coming. Amen. Warmth is coming. But not in our social, cultural climate today. We're going downhill rapidly, which I'm going to share with you this week. Information on that. We're going downhill rapidly. We're deteriorating rapidly. And it's like we're going into cold realms. But there's no summer coming. This isn't going to turn around. This is going to get worse and worse. Absolutely worse and worse. And we're not paying attention to it. We're not seeing the signs. We're just living as if everything's going to, summer's coming, spring's coming, warmth is coming. We'll get our bathing suits out. We'll enjoy the heat, the warmth, because that's the way the seasons work. And that's the way they do work. But the system we're in right now in terms of the morals and the spiritual climate, it's just going downhill faster than a toboggan on an icy hill. And I would suggest to you, we're not going to see much change come. I got verses for it, and I'm going to share them with you tomorrow. And we're going to have a great time studying together. So, even though it's getting cold, we know climate-wise it's going to get warmer. But morals and spiritual values are going to keep going down the tubes. Don't miss tomorrow. We got good stuff for you. See you then.